This is the story of one of the greatest women's wrestlers of her era, until WWE gets a hold of her. This is someone that is glaringly underrated, horrifically misrepresented, and all but forgotten, at least in the States. The story of Monster Ripper, who you may know as Bertha Faye. So this episode is only kinda back, not really way back, but this is a story that needs to be told, and I just don't know when we would get to it on our main show. One thing I love to do on Tim Bell Pod is retell or correct a wrestler's story when it was told wrong, or they weren't given enough credit, or sometimes not even told at all. And the time that is ripe for that is the WWF New Generation era. Wrestlers like Bastion Booger, Razor Rick Bogner, and Mantar. Wrestlers who have had their entire career overwhelmed, if not totally erased, because they had a little blip on a radar that turned out to be a bad stretch of Mondays on national TV. And our topic today, Monster Ripper, was an absolute badass, way before she ever had her flash in the pan in WWFE whatever. Monster Ripper traveled the globe, winning titles, wowing audiences, having steel cage matches, and honestly developing a style of wrestling that would make her an indie darling today at the very least. Then Vince McMahon and US 90s women's wrestling got a hold of her. But before any of that, she was just Rhonda. Rhonda Ann Sing was born February 21st, 1961 in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And from a very young age, she was a wrestling fanatic. Nerd alert. Being from Calgary, she started attending Stampede wrestling shows as a kid with her mom, and by the age of 5, she was locked into a dream. Rhonda was going to be a pro wrestler. And if you're not familiar with Stampede, it's a Canadian promotion ran by the Hart family. It produced Owen and Brett, obviously, Davey Boy, Pillman, Dynamite Kid, Benoit Oops, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, just to name a few. And by the time Rhonda was a teenager, she was actively looking for a way into the business. It's not like today where you just kind of sign up like a pottery class for a community college. You had to kind of do detective work to even get in front of a person that would maybe train you, and either way, definitely hurt you. That led to Sing knocking on the Hart family's door. She had hopes of getting trained in the Hart family dungeon. However, Stu Hart was not training women at the time.
Because girls are icky, and we just want to play with our action figures.
And while Rhonda was deeply saddened by this, she's kind of lucky she avoided what Stu was doing to people down there. Imagine if Guantanamo Bay had a pro wrestling school. Now imagine something worse than that. Then you have the Hart family dungeon. This old man is gonna try to kill you. So it was back to square one, and Rhonda game planning of a way to get into the pro wrestling business. Then while Sing was on vacation in Hawaii in 1978, she got a sign from the pro wrestling gods. Oh shit, Terry Funk. Hawaii was close enough to pick up Japanese women's pro wrestling, and she fell even more in love with the sport. Rhonda eventually found the contact information for Mildred Burke's training school. And Mildred Burke is like the first big time, big deal women's wrestler in the United States. In a lot of ways, she was kind of the Hulk Hogan of women's wrestling, because for her era, she was for sure the most famous, and at the time, the most game-changing, needle-moving women's wrestler ever. She was also married to the biggest women's wrestling promoter, Billy Wolf. So she had that creative control, brother. Billy Wolf treated Mildred and most of the women that worked for him badly. When Mildred left him, he basically blackballed her from the NWA, at least where they were set up in the Midwest. So she moves to California and opens up a training school. And eventually this 17-year-old Canadian girl is writing her a letter, and Mildred Burke decides to train Rhonda. At just 17 years old, Rhonda flew to Encino, California, finally having an end to the pro wrestling world she loved so much. And Mildred's school was tough because Mildred was tough. She was a legit shooter, and she pushed her trainees very hard, teaching them legit wrestling. But since Mildred Burke was so globally respected, her school drew a lot of attention from scouts from different pro wrestling companies. And that would help fast-track Rhonda's career, really fast. Rhonda was a pretty sizable human person, standing at 5'8" and weighing in at over 200 pounds. But with this size, she had power and agility rarely seen in women's pro wrestling. So after training mere weeks, she caught the eye of an All Japan women's scout. Now, I'm not the best at Japanese pro wrestling, but I've learned some, and I will attempt to explain some of this AJW stuff to you. First, they never needed some kind of revolution. They were the revolution 30 or 40 years ago. You can take just about any 80s or 90s All Japan match, whether it be women or men, flop it into any AEW, WWE, GCW, ROH show, and it's going to fit right in, if not be the most mind-blowing match you saw that night. AJW is a place that produced Manami Toyota, one of the greatest in-ring performers in pro wrestling history. Not for a woman, ever. In just a short time frame, Manami had 14 5-star matches. During basically the same time period, WWF as an entire company had 2. And in just a couple of months, AJW signed the inexperienced rookie, brought her over to Japan to become the Monster Ripper. Sorry, Bruno. And Monster Ripper isn't just a sweet name. She had an ever-evolving look that was pretty awesome too. She puffed out her hair and sometimes wore this sort of Power Ranger-looking outfit and tossed on some face paint. Debuting January 4th in 1979 in Tokyo, Rhonda, as Monster Ripper, had a tag team match teaming with Mami Kamuno against Japan's beloved beauty pair, Jackie Sato and Maki Ueda. And in Rhonda's own words, it was my first match, and I won. And if you're not familiar with the backstage scene of 70s, 80s, 90s Japanese pro wrestling, just know everyone was super mad that she won. Traditionally, in this era of Japanese wrestling, you spent years losing matches, going through brutal dojo training, paying your dues, setting up rings, setting up chairs, getting hazed by vets, before you earn the right to get your real gimmick and maybe get pushed. Not only had this barely trained North American come in and won, she had beat AJW Darlings, a team with Jackie Sato on it, the reigning WWWA World Singles Champion. The Japanese girls resented her, and they let her know it, because they beat the hell out of her. But Rhonda, who had been dead set on becoming a pro wrestler since 5 years old, who had moved a world away to make it happen, wasn't about to fold. Over time, she earned their respect by refusing to cave to the punishment, even fighting back. On the camera-facing side, Monster Ripper was immediately billed as an invading monster hill, the way All Japan would use, say, Stan Hansen or Bruiser Brody. Despite her limited skill set at first, Monster Ripper's power and presence made her a sensation, and she routinely wrestled multiple nights a week for AJW's grueling schedule. Monster Ripper also set off on a brawling blood feud with Jackie, establishing herself as one of the promotion's top heels. Then, just 6 months after her debut, July 31st, 1979, Monster Ripper defeated Jackie to capture the WWWA World Single Championship, becoming one of the few non-Japanese women to hold the championship at the time. Remember, she's just 18 years old and only months into her career. She dropped it back to Jackie September of 79 before winning the belt a second time by beating Jackie March 80 and holding it until she vacated it August of 80 after this kind of big brawling smoz no finish. And while Monster Ripper never quite reached the AJW title scene again, she was a key player in All Japan, working an insanely busy schedule against the best women's wrestlers on planet Earth. She was also a big piece of this style revolution in AJW. While it was Dump Masamoto, Crush Gals, Bull Nakano, and Aja Kong, etc., that deserved the bulk of the credit, Monster Ripper was absolutely a part of that upswing. By 82, she was feuding with AJW's next great face, Jaguar Ikoda. This feud also showcased that after being just a couple years into wrestling, Rhonda was an extremely improved wrestler. In fact, through this training and real-world experience, Monster Ripper was for sure one of the best women's wrestlers in the world at this moment. She had also cultivated an exciting moveset of brutal suplexes, press slams, later a powerbomb, and even a torture rack finish. By 83, Rhonda was ready to take on the world. She'd first traveled to Mexico, working as La Monster and later La Monstra. Then, after another stop in Japan, she fulfilled what I would assume would be a lifelong dream. She began wrestling in Stampede, in her hometown of Calgary, the promotion where she first fell in love with pro wrestling. And luckily for Rhonda, Stampede was now sometimes featuring women's matches.
Yucky.
And that is how Rhonda would spend the bulk of her next few years. Cycles of Japan, a little bit of Mexico, and a lot of working home in Canada for Stampede. In 1987, Stampede recognized Rhonda as their first ever women's champion. Her reign lasted until September 22nd, 1988, when she lost the title to old AJW pal Chigusa Nagayu. At the same time, Sing also built a major career in Puerto Rico, beginning in 1987 when she joined World Wrestling Council and quickly became the promotion's top woman wrestler. And she'd have a long-running feud with Wendy Richter with long matches, even a steel cage match. Over the next 4 years, she would win the WWC women's title between 5 to 8 times, depending on your source. But, either way, good. By the late 80s and into the 90s, La Monstra was also taking spots in EMLL, and then later AAA. And of course, Rhonda was still heading back to All Japan from time to time. This would include a November 21st, 91 steel cage match with Bull Nakano and Monster Ripper versus Aja Kong and Bison Kimura, immediately followed by Bull defending the WWA title against Monster Ripper in the same cage. And this match is brutal, it is bloody. Kong misses this huge dive from the top of the cage that is just crazy. Bull gives Ripper a top of the cage guillotine leg drop. If this match happened on Raw in the 90s, people would still talk about it like it was the greatest women's match ever. But to them, just a day of the week. And by the mid-90s, Rhonda had already had a meaningful, accomplished, globe-trotting, 15-year Hall of Fame career. And that is not poetic wording. She was inducted in 1998 to AJW's Hall of Fame. Then Vince McMahon gets a hold of her. In 1995, at the age of 34, Rhonda Sing joined the World Wrestling Federation. And just to set up the contrast between the US and Japan, here is roughly 100 years of United States women's wrestling. Just like the men's, women's wrestling was birthed in traveling shows in the carnivals in roughly the late 1800s. In the early 1900s, you had the rise of Cora Livingston. It's hard to track down a lot of 1900s information, but Cora debuted in roughly 1905, and by the 1910s, Cora became the earliest widely recognized women's champion. And then just after Cora comes Clara Mortensen to take center stage and bridge the gap between Cora and the already mentioned Mildred Burke. And Mildred Burke had drawing power and national visibility that just really didn't exist in the previous generations. Well, there are several other important women during this era. Mildred headlined, traveled relentlessly, and helped push women's wrestling far beyond novelty billing. And Mildred's era was legit as hell. Women's wrestling felt like a genuine major attraction, rather than a sideshow tucked in the corner. Burke and wrestlers like Ethel Johnson and Babs Wingo were getting top billing across the country, and the women's style was great at the time. A mix of actual amateur wrestling, fast-paced move, high-flying drop kicks. It was quick, it had energy. I honestly like it more than the men's wrestling from the same era. Then we regress, because here comes Fabulous Moolah. And look, man, the world is so awful right now. I really don't want to get into all the many things that makes Moolah a bad person. But just know, as awful as she was even worse for women's wrestling. This is where we go from the top of the card, fast-paced, hard-hitting, real pro wrestling, to whatever the hell Moolah was teaching. And it's not to say every wrestler Moolah trained was bad. That's absolutely not true. Moolah didn't give this era of women the tools to succeed purposefully. She didn't want to lose her spot at the top, and all she really cared about at the end of the day was having a warm body to hand to promoters, so she could in return skim that wrestler's pay. And that's who Vince got in business with in the 80s. Ask Wendy Richter how it went. By the mid-90s, a lot of people viewed women's wrestling in the US as bad, and I mean, it kind of was. It had been gutted by design, especially when you compare it to what Japan was doing at the exact same time. As Moolah lost her grip on the industry, it was handed off to men who, quite frankly, didn't give a shit about it. But apparently, Monster Ripper was being brought in to help revive women's wrestling in WWF. April 3rd, 1995, on an episode of Raw, we got our first glimpse of Rhonda on the screen. She was actually in her Monster Ripper getup as she attacked women's champion Alundra Blaze, getting her written off TV so that she can go have some surgeries. This immediately put Rhonda in the title scene, which sounds a lot cooler than it is. After Luna Vachon left in 94, the entire women's roster was basically Sunny, who was a manager, and then Alundra Blaze, the champ, wrestling the other woman, Bull Nakano, by 600 times. Once in a while, they'd drop in another Japanese woman or pull one of Moolah's workers for a run. The end goal was, apparently, to have Rhonda feud with Bull Nakano, but Bull got in trouble for them drugs, and plans changed. Instead, WWF pivoted to a storyline of Rhonda as Bertha Faye, Harvey Whippleman's trailer park girlfriend that skipped around the ring, blowing him kisses. It was meant to be a comedy gimmick. And look, man, I love comedy pro wrestling. One of my best friends is a man Boy Scout that gets paid to go around the country and punch tents. I love Orange Cassidy, Chuck Taylor. Chikara was like made for me. But WWE didn't exactly have George Carlin or Mitch Hedberg writing for it. WWE has never been able to consistently pull off comedy wrestling because their head of creative has the sense of humor of a hack open mic comedian bombing with fart jokes. Comedy at the level of boomer Facebook memes or wacky Myrtle Beach t-shirt shops. This was Doc Hendricks reshaping street jokes, Lawler butchering stolen Henry Youngman lines. And if someone likes that type of comedy, sure, great. But maybe don't bend someone's entire career around it. And the worst part is WWE always punches down. From Bertha to Nicole Bass to Eugene to Piggy James. It's never, hey, this is a great comedic wrestler, because they're turning pro wrestling on its head with an absurd and immersive character. It's always, you're not conventionally attractive to our creative team, so we think it would be hilarious if anyone ever loved you. So we get this badass athlete, the legendary Monster Ripper, turned into a running string of least common denominator fat jokes. And this weird Pepe Le Pewing story of Bertha pining after Harvey Whippleman, which WWE has done a million times, from George Still liking Miss Elizabeth in the 80s through probably yesterday. Rhonda would later say Faye felt like I was pimping myself out, like a prostitute to Vince. Wait, did I miss where she was trained by Moolah? To make matters even worse, she had to dumb down her moveset. She had to cut the majority of her power moves because they were making WWF's men look bad. But by June, Alundra Blaze was back, and Bertha hit the house show circuit with her to get ready for SummerSlam. And at SummerSlam 95 in Pittsburgh, Bertha Faye pinned Alundra Blaze to win the WWF Women's Championship. And look, winning the AJW belt is like a way bigger deal. But to your average mark, to the average American wrestling viewer, this is a big deal. This was a crowning achievement in kayfabe. So maybe now, the Monster Ripper comes out. This insanely strong, dominant pro athlete shows the world what she can actually do. Nope. They kept up with the undermining, fat-shaming commentary, and she was booked to wrestle at 5% of her talent with a ridiculous, poorly written character. After a 57-day title reign, Sing dropped the title back to Alundra Blaze on Raw, October 23rd, 1995. And more or less, the Faye experiment was washed. And what did Alundra Blaze do with that title? Well, she took it to WCW with her and threw it in the trash can live on Monday Nitro, December 18th, 1995. And honestly, fair. But pro wrestling, like real sports, is very championship driven. And to have your roster fighting for a dirty garbage belt isn't the best luck. So it effectively killed the WWF women's division, putting upwards of 1 to 3 wrestlers out of work. Bertha's last match would be Survivor Series 1995, with her team winning a traditional Survivor Series style match. Then just kind of sitting at home before asking for her release and quietly exiting the company in early 96. Now, if this was just a meaningless swing and a miss by WWF, WWE, then, no harm done. But this effectively ruined her career. And as much as it should not be her legacy, this is the most eyeballs she was ever in front of. And it's hard to wash that off you. There are people to this day that still treat Rainn Wilson like he's actually Dwight Schrute. People are dumb. With Bertha Faye overwhelming Monster Ripper, her reputation and credibility in the wrestling world was destroyed, especially as far as fans go, even if the people in the industry knew who she really was. After some time off, Rhonda starts taking sporadic dates in Canada and Mexico for the next couple of years. And in the States and in Canada at the time, you didn't have a lot of options. A lot of these smaller promotions, indie promotions, were just brutal and you were not going to make any money. So wanting to get back to a livable wage, Rhonda Sing went to WCW in 1999, but WCW did not have a meaningful, sustained women's division at that point. so Rhonda made appearances with the Nitro Girls dance team as the character Beef. And this wasn't like a cool, progressive, we all have different bodies and that's okay sort of thing. It was another joke. Rhonda did, however, wrestle a few times on WCW TV. She lost a hardcore title shot to Norman Smiley. She wrestled Miss Mona, aka the future Molly Holly. She also did a few matches with Miss Elizabeth, which sounds like whatever, but that means they trusted Rhonda to go take someone who's not a wrestler out to have a match in front of a live crowd. And her last verifiable match was in WCW when she lost to Miss Elizabeth on May 10th, 2000 on an episode of Thunder after Lex Luger ran in and put Rhonda in the torture rack. While these matches proved that she still had it, even later in her career, by mid-2000, she officially retired. Her final years were spent back in Calgary, away from the spotlight. In 2001, she was working as a caregiver for people with disabilities. But tragically, on July 27, 2001, Rhonda Sing passed away from the very vague release statement of medical problems. She was only 40 years old. And there's a wide range of rumored causes of death, from diabetes to a heart attack to worse. But no matter what, 40 years old is another pro wrestling tragedy. And Rhonda Monster Ripper's legacy is one of the most devastating examples of US wrestling bias. This thought that if it didn't happen here on Mondays, it didn't happen. That logic, or lack of, needlessly destroys legitimate, accomplished careers for no reason other than fans and wrestling media would rather bury their heads in WWE sand than ever explore outside it. And I've seen people call Rhonda a what if. She was not a what if. She was a did. She did it at the highest levels, just not here. She was an AJW Hall of Famer. She received recognition from the Cauliflower Alley Club in 2003, and Slam Wrestling's Canadian Hall of Fame also honored her. And Monster Ripper's in-ring accomplishments speak for themselves. Major titles across the world. She even won the beloved WWF Women's Belt. She was one of the few North American women that truly succeeded in wrestling at a time when not a lot of them were. And her ability to have a dream, chase it, get it, crush it, should be her legacy, not some Vince McMahon fever dream.